this is the Mason Green Star blocks, and I'm going to pass this around in a little bit when I get to the, well, might as well pass it around now. This is a block that's primarily cellulose from paper, and it also has concrete in it. It does have Portland cement in it, so for a lot of the purists, you know, this isn't particularly a material that a lot of people will go with as being green. And there's also some elements in here to bond it together. For many, many years.
What about the breathability of that? Does it have a breathability?
Yeah, it does have a breathability. Now, it doesn't have the phase change aspect like Adobe and compressor block does. And so the thermal aspect isn't there. Or we don't know.
Right.
Let's put it that way. We don't know what, if any at all, there is to that. Maybe they'll...
kind of stays cool.
Yeah, but it's not a phase change thing. It's not going to have that sort of absorption and evaporation. Also, some of the hottest structures you would ever be in would be like a concrete block house.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if you built a house out of just CMU blocks, and you'll be, you know, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll rather be outside. You know, people just actually have to leave. You know, just like that.
Tim White, what he would do with that is put the clay plaster so you'll get that late heat flux.
Yeah, that's right. So the coating would have that.
Coated with the clay plaster, they would get that.
Yeah.
But does that affect the inside of the house?
You do it on the inside.
Well, you've got.
Oh, you put it on the inside. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So these blocks are full-size block. Of course, this is a half block here. Are 10 inches by 14 inches by I think about 3 maybe inches, maybe 3.5 inches thick. So they are designed to be the same proportion and size roughly as the typical Adobe block. And so this is something that's an alternative to Adobe and compressor block. And because it does have this adhesive sort of aspect, we have some material that now the advantages are it's made out of recycled materials by and large because it's much larger percentage of cellulose, not a very high content of Portland cement. And there's some acrylic latex-based material in there that's mixed up that helps kind of glue it together, sort of like an Elmer's glue sort of thing. And that's one of the things that made this a successful block, because back in the old days when came up with papercrete, it would be too much paper and fall apart or burn, or it'd be too much concrete where it would just get hot and stay hot. And so they were monkeying around with a formula, started adding some stuff, so you could have a high cellulose content and still be able to have a very good thermal insulative capability for the cellulose and flame resistance. They're going through their final tests for their acceptance in a lot of the codes. IECC hopefully someday will acknowledge this stuff, but right now it has been accepted in some communities as being a good infill material.
What about the compressive strength? I mean, how does that work? Is it really strong? Like
It's very strong, but it's, you know, I don't know what the final numbers are on it. Yes.
What were they using for mortar?
What they used for mortar was the same material. Yeah. It's like with compressed earth block, you know, you want, the ideal mortar is what the blocks are made out of themselves.
Right.
And it's the same thing with this. It's you'll see them mixing in a minute where they have taken big, huge bales of recycled newspaper. You know, it's very, very, very fibrous. And they break it up and they put it in this mixer with the concrete and their stuff to make the mortar, so that as the mortar, you know, evaporates, it's bonding itself to a monolithic wall structure with all the other blocks. And as you can see on the upper right picture, the way the sun is hitting that wall, you can tell that it was definitely a very amateur crew. You know, you see the blocks really aren't lined up too particularly well. You know, this is something that if there were masons or my job, I'd go, well, okay, you're fired. You know, this is pretty rough. But, you know, you kind of get what you pay for. And frankly, as you can tell in the final pictures on this particular house, actually this is an outhouse more than anything else, it worked out. It really wasn't critical that these blocks were a little bit out of line some places, you know, so I really had to eat my words, I eat my thoughts, because I didn't really want to tell anybody that I made some stuff. So, the way you can really cover up a lot of sins with plaster. And we certainly did that this week in their Mason. So this ended up being a very, very nice little outhouse for the place. And you made up the difference for all these blocks and everything that were out of place. But they tried to do it in the best type of masonry construction, where you don't want the vertical hip joints to line up on top of each other. You want them staggered, you know, so that you got a better structure on your wall. So you can see where the staggered joints are. That means they had to cut a few blocks up to you know, make up the difference and such.
So that's this material?
Yeah, that's the material. Yes,
Question. You said part of the makeup was newspaper and cellulose. Now, over the long period, will that turn to dust, or is it because it's mixed, it's going to, I guess, stay in the state?
Well, about 4 years ago, when he was making one of his runs, I was up there and he said, "Here, take a few blocks and play with them." I took a lot of the blocks and supported my desk down at the office, and then I took some of the blocks and put it in the backyard. I said, let's just see what Mother Nature does with them. I didn't cover them, I didn't coat them, I didn't do anything to them, and they look exactly the same today as they did years ago when I put it out.
Oh, cool.
And so that's totally unprotected stuff. And so once you've got it underneath plaster, I don't see what you can do to it. There's no way that I can imagine it going to dust. And it is bug resistant. You know, this is not something that termites go in and chew and eat up and make a big, huge nest. They won't do it. There's just too much of the concretious material where it's not worth it to go for the cellulose. Also, the cellulose is not full of any, you know, the toxic dyes and all that stuff that people might worry about. That's really not a problem. It's totally encapsulated, and there's no evidence that I know of any of that being a bad air, you know, air quality issue.
Well, if it gets wet, does it release certain gases?
I haven't noticed. You know?
Is this meant to be a load-bearing wall?
Well, this will be a load-bearing wall, and this is something they're very confident about, the load-bearing capability. It does have a very high compressive strength. We did the compressive strength test. I don't know how many pounds per square inch that was, but especially on something of this scale, where it's a relatively small building, one story, with a relatively light roof, there's no problem at all about that being a
Do you remember the price per block?
No. I don't recall the price per block.
What kind of foundation did they?
On that one, it was not a rubble foundation. That was probably just a basic stem wall foundation. Might be the typical FA foundation, where it's, you know, a foot wide and 30 inches below grade. I wasn't sure. You know, that was all put together before I showed up. Now, on something like this, when you are planning on using an adobe wall, or if you're using this Mason Green Star blocks, you do want to have a structural engineer, a soils engineer, go out to your site and find out really what kind of soil condition you have, because these houses and buildings, these structures will definitely be more heavy than standard construction. These blocks here come in at about 8 pounds per block. Compressed earth blocks are about 35 más o menos pounds per block. And so these are not lightweight. And so you've got to make sure that you've got a soil condition that will be able to support this. So a soils engineer does tests. They usually do 2 holes that they bore at 2 opposite parts of where you're going to build your structure, and they come up with a report that says the compressive supportive strength of the soil is so-and-so, this is what we found below grade, etc., etc. And the structural engineer, knowing how much that house is going to weigh, will be able to design the foundation just right. Not too much, but enough to support it, and not over-design the thing. Now, we, at the Adobe workshop in El Rito, New Mexico, there was a lot of discussion about the foundation.